Have you ever wondered how prescription drugs get their names? It's more complicated than you might think. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, where we help you upgrade your English with current events and trending topics. By listening here, you'll expand your horizons in English and maybe even learn something useful at the same time. I said maybe. On today's lesson, well, this won't be useful, but it might be interesting. Xoloft, Ibrance, glucotrol, scalaxin, Zocor, or my favorite, Mounjaro. How do pharmaceutical companies come up with these names? I was curious, and I'll share what I found out with you today. In the second half of the lesson, I'll give you plenty of examples of the English expression plenty of. And JR has a song of the week. Let's get started. Let's start with this. What is a pharmaceutical drug? It's a medicine to prevent, treat, or diagnose a disease or medical condition. Typically, we think of pharmaceuticals as prescription pills, but drugs can also be injected or taken in other forms. But regardless of the form, they are recipes of chemical compounds. The process of developing a drug is laborious. It can take 10 years and over $1 billion of investment to bring the average drug to market. And long before you or I ever take a pill, scientists in laboratories have tested combination after combination of chemicals to see what might work. This is a very organized process. And every time a combination is tried, it gets an internal name, usually just a combination of letters and numbers. The vast majority of these chemical compounds, that's what the combinations are called. The vast majority of these compounds will never have another name because they never get farther than a lab experiment. But as soon as a compound starts to show some promise, the company starts to develop two names, the generic name and the brand name. The generic name is a name of the compound. It's the name of the recipe. This is the name that scientists will use in research papers and at conferences. The generic name is not owned by any company. It's a worldwide name to describe the discovery, the ingredients, and how they're put together. The generic name will live forever, and the generic name is the same everywhere around the world. At the same time, the company that discovers a new drug must also develop a brand name. The brand name is the name of the company's product. It's the name you see on commercials. It's the name on the label of the bottle at the pharmacy. So let's take a simple example. Tylenol is a brand name. It's the name of the pill that you swallow. The company that makes Tylenol is Johnson & Johnson. No other company can make a pill called Tylenol. That is the brand name. The generic name for the chemical compound in the pill is acetaminophen. That's the name of the recipe. And plenty of other companies can make acetaminophen and use their own brand names if they want. I grew up taking Tylenol for pain in the United States. I can go downstairs to the pharmacy across the street from my apartment in Mexico and look for acetaminophen, and I'll know I'm taking basically the same thing. All right, so way back when a drug is first being developed, the pharmaceutical company that makes the discovery gets to create both names, the generic name or the scientific name and the brand name. The generic name is formulaic. The suffix, the second part of the word, explains how the drug works. So similar drugs that work in the same way, will all end similarly. For example, here are some generic names for drugs that lower cholesterol: fluvastatin, lovastatin, pravastatin, notice a pattern, rosuvastatin, simvastatin. They all end in the word statin, which describes how they work. The company gets to pick the first part of the drug's generic name. Now, they almost always use two syllables: pravastatin, lovastatin, so two syllables. Now, this name can't mean anything. It has to be a made-up word, and it can't be considered marketing or promotional in any way. A company will develop a few generic names for the drug and submit it to a national naming agency. In the US, it's the United States Adopted Names Council. The national agency will approve one name and then submit it to the World Health Organization for global approval. And if it gets WHO approval, then the generic drug is officially named for worldwide use. How about the brand name? Well, here, companies have much more flexibility. This is the name of their product. Nobody else will ever use it. So they can get creative, and since it's a brand name, it can be promotional. So drug companies try to make names that evoke emotions that they want associated with the drug. So if you suffer from allergies, you might take Claritin. That drug will help clear your system so you can breathe clearly. The commercials show a foggy view of the world, followed by a clear view of the world, and that's Claritin. It sounds like clarity That's what they want you to be thinking when you choose an allergy medication. Clarity, Claritin. So drug companies work with creative agencies and copywriters to create the name. They write a creative brief. What are the emotions they want people to feel when thinking about the drug? And then the creative team will look for all the words that evoke that emotion. They'll read literature, watch movies, do interviews, scour the dictionary, search the thesaurus, anything to get inspiration. And then they come up with a list of a few hundred names. And then the process of narrowing down the list starts. So first, a name has to be easy to say. Is it easy to say in English? Is it easy to say in the other places where it will be sold? Second, are there problems with translation? You don't want a drug name to cause confusion or embarrassment if it translates into some other word in a different language. Is it possible that the name is too close to the name of another drug? If so, take it off. If a doctor writes the name with messy handwriting, could that be confused with another drug? If so, take it off or change the spelling. Sometimes drugs include a strange letter, like it might end in a Q or have a strange combination of letters, like Xeljanz. That's spelled Xeljanz, Xeljanz. That's not the most logical way to spell it, but that's the point. When written, it won't be confused with anything else. Now, when a company has a preferred name, it submits it to a regulator for approval. The US and Europe have agencies that must approve prescription drug names on safety grounds. Overall, the process takes years, but it's worth it. A typical branded drug makes over $18 billion in sales over its lifetime, so it needs to have a good name. So here are a few examples of brand names. If you want to lower your blood pressure, you take Lopressor. Embrace is a word for hug. You hug with the middle part of your upper body, let's say. So Ibrance sounds like embrace, and that's a treatment for breast cancer. But the reason I did this lesson, the reason I was curious about this, was the name of the medication for obesity, which is called Mounjaro. And the reason this made me laugh is that, to me, it sounds like Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro is sometimes used as a metaphor for doing something very difficult. So for people who suffer from obesity, controlling their weight is very difficult. And for many people, finally getting their weight under control can seem like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, achieving a difficult goal. Now, I don't know if this is why they chose Mounjaro as the name of this treatment, or if there's another reason, but for me, it just jumped off the page. Mounjaro is short for Mount Kilimanjaro, which is a metaphor for success. Today, I'm going to tell you about the expression plenty of. This has two related meanings. It can either mean a lot, or it can mean more than enough. Plenty of goes right before your noun, and you can put that at the beginning, middle, or end of a sentence. In today's current events lesson, you learned that Tylenol is a brand name and acetaminophen is a generic drug name. Johnson & Johnson is the company that makes Tylenol. No other company can sell a pill called Tylenol. However, plenty of companies make acetaminophen pills. That means that many companies do that. Lots of companies do that. Plenty of companies make acetaminophen means many companies make acetaminophen. Now, when drug makers name a drug, they work with creative agencies to develop the names. Sometimes the name a drug maker really wants sounds too much like another drug, so they have to eliminate the name they really want to use. But that's okay, because the creative agencies give the drug makers plenty of options. They give the drug makers a lot of options for names. So if one name doesn't work, they can choose from plenty of other options, lots of other options. And this is an example where plenty of means more than enough. If you're going to sell a product that's expected to make $18 billion, which is what most new prescription drugs make in their lifetime. If you want to sell something for $18 billion, you don't want to think about just one or two potential names. You want to start with a pool of names that's more than enough for you to use, so that if anything goes wrong with one name, you still have many more options, more than you need. Pfizer said in an online article that it starts with 200 potential names and narrows it down to 100 names before doing serious analysis. Still, they have 100 options. That's plenty of names, plenty of options. That's more than they need, but they want to have the options. A lot of people are hesitant to switch jobs. I know I was at my previous company for 12 years, and a lot of employees are worried that they won't be able to get perks and benefits at a different company. So imagine your company gives you 4 weeks of paid vacation, and you like having that time off, and you don't want to lose it by going to a different company, so you don't look for a new job. But wait, plenty of companies offer 4 weeks of vacation. And even if they don't advertise it, you can still ask for it. Plenty of companies offer generous vacation. That means there are more than enough options for you. When I wrote these words, it was 11:11 a.m. I promised I'd get this lesson finished by noon, so the rest of the Plain English team could get to work producing the full and complete lesson, which would eventually be available at plainenglish.com/557. Well, I had 54 minutes left to finish the writing. Was that enough time? Of course. That was plenty of time. We are almost at the song of the week, and after that, it's just a few more words and I'm done. That was plenty of time. It was enough time. Just a quick note, you might remember that last week we talked about having something to spare, and I said that means you had more of it than you needed. So how is that different than plenty of? Well, with plenty of, you're describing something that exists. But with to spare, you're describing something that you have. Sometimes those are the same. I have plenty of time. I have time to spare. Those mean the same thing. But there are plenty of companies that make acetaminophen that describes something that exists. There exist many companies that make this product. Whereas here, take some of my Tylenol, I have some to spare. That means I'm offering you 2 pills because I have more than I need right now. Today's song of the week is I Caught Myself by Paramore. This was included in the soundtrack of the 2008 movie Twilight. Catch yourself is a funny phrase. If I catch you doing something, I discover you doing it. Usually something you shouldn't be doing. I might catch you taking a nap at your desk. You turned your chair toward the corner to make it look like you were reading a file, but I saw your eyes were closed. I caught you. Well, when you catch yourself, you become aware that you're doing something without consciously thinking about it. You might resolve to not check your phone while you're doing something important, but you might catch yourself refreshing your email. What happened? You picked up the phone without thinking and you caught yourself. Anyway, that's the title of the song, I Caught Myself by Paramore. Well, that's all for today, Thursday, March 23rd, 2023. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Every once in a while, I want to create a lesson that just reflects whatever I happened to be thinking about at the time. So this was one of those. I spent a good half hour reading about how drugs were named. I was fascinated. I'm glad I learned all this, and I'm happy to share it with you. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new lesson. See you then.